Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you today and look out and see so many friends that have had the chance to collaborate with over the years. I'm going to move down here if y'all don't mind. I'm not much of the guy to stand on a podium, so I'm going to come down this way. Today, again, my talk is to really share a little bit about my journey over the last really 4 years now. I'm starting my 4th year at All Saints Episcopal School. And I hope through this time to share with you a little bit of encouragement about how you can at your school think about intentional innovation. So what I want to do first is I want to talk first of all about this idea of innovation, because as I have the chance to speak to groups, what is really most interesting to me often is that we all talk about innovation like we know what we're talking about, right? That first of all, that we all have this universal knowledge about what it means to be innovative. And what I've learned for sure is that what I think innovation is and what you think innovation is are very different, and that is great, that is okay. But when you look at the word innovation, actually national surveys have shown that almost 80% of people say they don't even know what we really mean when we say innovation. And so I want to start with this just to own that fact. Now, if you go and you even look at the definition of innovation, I love it because it's actually even more confusing, right? It's the action or process of innovating. Great, thank you so much for that. But so I want to give a little clarity, at least for what I'm talking about today. So when I use the term innovation, I like to think about going all the way back to its Latin root, the word innovatus. And really this term goes all the way back saying that we would be able to renew or change. It's been used for centuries in various applications long before we began to talk about it in schools. But one other layer that I always like to add for what innovation is in our schools is that beyond just being renewal or change, it has to also offer something else pretty important. It has to be able to offer this impact across our school, and then it has to have the ability to scale. Now, this is where it's really important because sometimes things are termed often as innovation, and I kind of, am curious about what that really means if it only touches a few folks or has a lack of impact across an entire campus or for many students. And so when you think about renewal or change that is able to then have high impact but also have scalability across your campus, this is what I'm referring to as innovation. And so when I think about how we have gone about this process of innovation, we have really worked really hard to create a process that allows for all participants at our school to be involved. It all starts with ideation. It starts with this ability to have people who are really curious in your campuses and at your schools. You have to create an environment where folks are willing to be curious and ask lots of questions. I use the word pondering a lot, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I love this idea of how we ponder on things, how we think. So we have to have the ability to, again, ideate, but then we have to move into implementation. You have to have people on your campus that are willing to go beyond just an idea, and they're able to actually then start taking some risk and trying some new things, renewal, or changing, or doing brand new things that have never been done. If you do those things, you will then end up with this word we call innovation that can have a dramatic impact on student experience at your schools. And so this is an entire process that really relies on, at the beginning, a lot of front runners, as I refer to them. And again, as I tell you about our journey in a minute, I always want to stop and give credit that the things that we've done at All Saints Episcopal School have happened because we've had a lot of front runners. As I came into the campus, I began to find those folks that were willing to run, that were willing to go, and were willing to take heavy risk. Now, in this entire process, the thing that I want to make sure you understand is that too often we talk about innovation and we think about the ideas, we think about the creative or the ingenious things that come out of maybe schools that we think is the innovation. But truly the innovation is not the idea, it's not even the planning and the polishing and the evaluation. It is the really hard work, it's that implementation that really is the innovation itself. It's that putting those risk takers in environments where they can actually take those opportunities is what really innovation is all about. And so one of the things I talk about often with our faculty is I encourage them to have a bias to action. And I encourage you, if you take nothing back with you other than this one thing, that this could be powerful at your school, is to really think about how you can encourage but also give permission to your faculty, your staff, to actually have this bias to action. That they have an idea, I'd like for them to act on it. Now, if they act on it and it doesn't go exactly right, then we can correct that. But the hardest thing to do is to have a group of leaders on your campus that are afraid to make a change or to go forward. And so a bias to action to me is key in being intentional in your innovation. So the whole idea of innovation really sounds pretty simple, right? I just summed it all up. But really it's very complex. When you think about what needs to happen on our campuses, so we have to have all of these things coming together at one time to create this space where we can renew or create change in our campuses. So when we think about this idea of intentional innovation, I use the phrase often that we need to lead with purpose, that when we make decisions, we have to know why we're making decisions and then what impact we hope those have across our campuses and for our students. And so when we look at this, I use this phrase an awful lot with our faculty. I talk about money, energy, and time. Now, when we talk about the money, energy, and time, we all have these things on our campuses, maybe in different amounts or different varieties or different ways, but every campus has money, energy, and time that they are going to commit to the things that are important to them. And what I find often is that so many schools will actually be talking about what is important to their campus or important to their students, but if you really were to do an analysis of their money, energy, and time, it might not all center on that one thing. And trust me, the one thing that I've learned over 30 years in education is that students are savvy to what we say and then what we do, right? They know when we're talking about something, but we're not actually investing in it in the other ways. And so we really have focused at All Saints on really bringing together these three things, money, energy, and time, into our North Star. And so I really encourage you as you think about how to be intentional about innovation to really make sure that you don't only have good ideas, but you go back and evaluate how we're investing in those in a North Star. Now, I do want to make sure I give really big props here to Grant Lichtman, who is going to be here at this conference, which is really cool to me because I love Grant. And Grant actually visited our campus a couple of years ago as we were taking a very deep dive and trying to figure out a little bit about who we were, where we were going, and how we were going to get there, that North Star. And so when Grant came, he began to use that term that y'all have a North Star. Y'all are formulating it right now. And since that time, we began to talk even more and more about what the North Star means for us and how we can get where we're going, and that is important. Now, I do want to encourage you, if you haven't read Grant's book, Moving the Rock, it's a great read. A lot of what I'm talking about today was actually shaped by this book. Grant's second book, or actually his third book, has just come out, Thrive, and I've started reading it just actually this week, and in chapter 14, he does a whole chapter on finding your North Star. It's a very good read. If you can't right now answer what's your North Star at your school, you need to get this book. So when we talk about this idea of intentional innovation, though, what I want to really spend some time on today is talking about time, talent, and then, very importantly, space. Because these three areas are ways that you can focus your effort on being intentional about how you innovate, how you renew or change the learning outcomes for your students. And so when I jump in, first of all, to space, I want to talk a lot about how we have done it at All Saints. So please bear with me as I go through and tell a little bit of our journey. Now, my journey actually goes back before I ever came to All Saints Episcopal School. For 20 years, I was at the Oak Ridge School in the Metroplex of Dallas-Fort Worth area. There I served in many roles. I was a teacher, I was a coach, but large amount of that time I was the middle school head. At one point, probably around 2002, I was in my office and I heard a lot of students running down my hallway, which, as y'all might imagine, I was the kind of head of school that loved that, right? So I knew that something good was happening. They encouraged me to come down and see what's happening in the classroom. As I rushed down to the classroom, I was so taken by their energy, their love for what they were doing, but more importantly, that they wanted to share with me. And so as they started to tell me about what they were doing, they were engaged with doing some QR codes of what they were learning in a math class. That dates me a bit, right? QR codes. But they were working with QR codes. Now, the scene that I saw was actually this exact scene right here. This is the picture from that day. And as I was there loving that moment and enjoying, again, the passion from these students, I had this moment of sadness, though, that occurred right after that. And it's when I looked at this in my mind and I saw that our students were literally trapped by this classroom, right? This classroom was trapping them between the rows of the desks to do something that was different, something that was innovative. And I knew that I had let down my teachers who I'd challenged so hard to be, again, involved with active learning and be doing new pedagogical practices. And so from that day on, I began to think, how are we going to change this? I don't want to have this experience again. I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can do for our teachers. So we launched into redesigning spaces. So that very next year, we actually built this Learning Commons that is still at Oak Ridge today. And I engaged the students, I engaged the teachers in building these new spaces that were much more in line with the goals that we had for our school. And I will tell you that we built this entire Learning Commons in a side flex room for just under $30,000. Again, I believe in frugal innovation. But after that time, it really launched this whole thought process for me that we talk so much about how we want to improve student outcomes, and we invest a lot of energy in some of those really high-level ways that we do that through our faculty, through curriculum, through admissions, and so many more ways. But how much time were we spending in those other areas that have a day-to-day, minute-to-minute impact on our students? So it really began this really deep pondering for me, thinking about how we could actually engage in that. And around 2010, a book came out that was really important to me, and it helped solidify a lot of the things that I'd been talking about, but didn't quite understand where I was going with it. The book Third Teacher, if you haven't read it, is an incredible collection of really a lot of designers and architects and educators that were really thinking about this idea that goes all the way back to this really amazing quote by Loris Malaguzzi, who said there are 3 teachers in every learning space. There is the adult, the teacher themselves. There are the co-learners, the other children that are present. But then lastly, the physical environment is a teacher. Now, this was an epiphany for me because I knew already, I had been struggling with it, I had lived through it, that I knew that the environment itself was the third teacher. And I knew that many times over my career, I had not been employing the right third teacher for our students. And so as we began to look at how we began to design spaces, this carried into my role at All Saints Episcopal School in Tyler. Now, let me just walk you through a few of the things that we have done at All Saints to show you a little bit of the journey. So this was the boardroom that I inherited as I came into All Saints Episcopal School. I'm sure many of you have boardrooms very similar to this, or probably a lot nicer even. When I walked into this boardroom, though, I realized as I began to ask questions that it was used about once a month for our board to meet and to discuss our strategic planning. It was used a few times, maybe throughout the month, for our leadership team to come together and to discuss and to plan. But other than that, it had no impact on student experience. So that first year, I asked our board president if I could move all of our meetings actually outside of the boardroom, and what I wanted to do is to take them into the different spaces across campus. So I took them into classrooms, I took them into the gym, I took them all over. That year we had actually 10 meetings. I have less now, but I had 10 that year. And so I took them all across campus, and I was so taken aback by that many of our trustees hadn't been in those classrooms or spaces in a while if their kid wasn't there, right? And so that was really empowering for them. But more than that, when I came to them a few months later, still in my first year, and asked them if there might be a better use for this space, they all had to say, and they laughingly said, well, we never meet there anyway. Why not do something else with it? So what we did is we turned this space into our Fab Lab, which is this incredible space that has a 100-watt laser cutter, 2 medical-grade printers, it has, again, vinyl graphics machines, has our different machines to allow our students to use things like Raspberry Pis. But this is the really ultimate maker space for us on campus. But it used to be our boardroom, and we were able to, with a very little bit of money, transform this into another space. We actually had a few other areas I want to share with you. We had another area that was a very traditional library space that was really not used for much more than a few students during study halls. And it was a space that was definitely underutilized when you think about student experience. We ended up thinking through how this might be transformed into what now is our design studio across the campus. And we have now students of all ages that are able to use this for design thinking and different activities. A couple of other spaces that I'd like to share with you. We had these things. Do y'all remember these? I hope they're a memory for you, but we had computer labs, right? A few of you may have a few of these left on your campuses. What we began to ask the question is, if we looked at our computer lab, our students have been one-to-one for several years, even when I came to All Saints, and all of our students had computers in their backpacks that far outpowered what was sitting on these desks. And we began to ask the question, how could we reimagine this third teacher into not just doing something that has already been done, but something even better? And we ended up building our Idea Lab, which is our blended learning space. In our blended learning space, we actually have our students that are able to take now 4 levels of Mandarin Chinese, Italian, medical terminology, digital arts, and 9 other classes that expands our curriculum, but also expands the depth of learning for our students. But all we had to do is reimagine what this third teacher might be for our students. So when I think about these few examples, I hope that maybe right now you've started thinking about, are there missed opportunities at your school? And I know many of you are thinking, no, I don't think there are, but I would challenge you to continue to think about how space has an impact on that student outcome, student experience. And so when you think about going back to your campus, I'm going to ask you to do a learning walk and really think about what that looks like. Now, you can create any scale you want. I actually had one that I used, and I can share it with you. That as I walked around campus, I kind of placed a value on what I thought this had as far as student experience. But so when you think about this missed opportunity, I want to share a couple other stories that maybe are a little more out there. Those are, to me, pretty traditional stories about spaces and missed opportunities. One of my other favorite stories is the creation of our Collaboratory. So our Collaboratory is actually this amazing digital forest that we created in our early learning and lower school. Now, this space was really designed by teachers and students in a really cool design thinking process that really was designed to do a few things. It was designed to be an area where we could have independent learning going on, small group activities, but also whole group learning all at the same time. That's pretty hard to imagine. And so as we began to go through this process, the teachers themselves began to get a deep understanding of what the third teacher is, but also how they needed to partner with our third teacher. What I found out is through this process that our teachers had really never thought about how the third teacher was helping or hurting them in the classroom. But after this process, they would never go back. I could never take them back into a space that didn't serve their needs in that third teacher, which to me is maybe the most powerful thing. And so now we have this incredible, immersive digital forest that welcomes our students into our building every day, into what, again, is this Collaboratory. It has reading cubbies. It has really cool areas where our students can make choices about, do they want to have a pull-out desk, do they need to drop down, or do they want to lay on their belly? Whatever their learning style or what their learning need is that moment, the Collaboratory is that perfect third teacher. But since that time, that has grown into some other really cool design thought for our teachers and for me. We now, this year, just opened our new early learning and lower school, and it really was a renovation of most of the spaces with a few new classrooms added. But we turned that into now what's called a learning village. You can see the outside of each of our classrooms are actually these really cool home fronts. We don't refer to them as classes anymore. We refer to them as homes. And our students actually get a sense of belonging the minute they walk through the door. That was something that we really wanted. When we did our research, we found out that student outcomes can really be measured in a lot of ways, but the one commonality among them all is that a student who belongs does better in school. So we thought, how can we have a third teacher that actually takes care of that for us at times, right? Not all the time, but some of the time. So this learning village now has resulted in this place that our students love. This picture I had to include. This was actually on the cover of the local newspaper in our town when the school opened, and this is a family. The Nalbeck children would be so excited right now if they knew I was showing this picture. But I love this picture. It shows this absolute joy of school, right? How many kids do you see that this is the look of them seeing their school, right? Them seeing their third teacher. And so when we think about how we use this to really create a space that was an encourager, that really was about this idea of renewal or change, I believe that we always went back to our North Star. And I have to pause always and remind you of this because there were many times on this journey where we might have had a chance, or there were huge opportunities, or players or agents that were trying to get us off the course of our North Star journey. And we had to go back to that over and over again. We had to make sure that we were reminded about our deep passion to really follow our mission, that is igniting passion to impact our world, and we do that through authentic learning and student agency. So knowing where we were going, then the journey to get there was so much easier for us. It never had to be contentious. It really never had to be difficult. It was simply asking questions about how does this get us to our North Star. Now, as we go on, one of the other stories I wanted to share that's a little more out there is our learning farm. Y'all may have seen what we're doing with our learning farm. We actually have the largest school learning farm in the state of Texas now. And this area that we built our learning farm on when I came to campus was actually this big mound of dirt. It was right across from the lower school and early learning. It was actually one of the biggest eyesores on our campus, and it was all the buzz. When I came in to my role as head of school, I had a group of parents that wanted us to build a big parking lot there. They were passionate about a parking lot. Can you believe that? Passionate about a parking lot. They didn't want to give to it, but they were passionate that we needed a parking lot, right? We also had a group that were really passionate that we should sell that land and just get rid of it because we could never do anything with it. So in my first days on campus, I began to ask lots of questions about what we really could do with this land, but more importantly, where were we going with the education of our children? Well, long story short, but I love being on a farm. My daughter's an equestrian. I'd spent a lot of time in the years before going to Tyler with a farm. And every time students came to our home and saw the farm, I watched immediately these children become these just fervent learners. They were running all over. They were asking questions. And so one day I remember I threw out, what are the ways that we can actually create the most authentic learning space that also gives agency to early learners? I said, is there a way that we could do that through farming? Immediately a fire lit under several of the teachers, and they got very excited. From that time, though, we have built, again, this really incredible learning farm that has now over 24 full plots, not to mention our chickens. We have our second graders who are our chicken farmers. They actually nurture and nourish the chickens every day. They're responsible with taking care of them, but also selling eggs and carpool every 2 weeks. And trust me, the work they put into running this business, but also marketing it and also caring for those chickens is tremendous. I love nothing more than to see an adult come to campus and to ask questions about the chickens that our kids feel are too elementary for them, asking about the eggs and can they be left out or they need to be refrigerated, and our kids remind them, there's a bloom on an egg, you need to know that. And it's really amazing to watch the depth of learning. But beyond that, our students now actually sell all of our goods that are grown on the farm into our cafeteria, which I'll talk more about in a minute, that is called the Garden of Eden. So they actually negotiate into what we sell, what the price will be for that, but then they also taste fresh food every day, 2 different varieties.